From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, turning a crisis into magic. Here's what's happening. The profits for two iconic Wall Street firms, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, plunged sharply last quarter as volatile markets cut deeply into investment banking. Goldman's profits tumbled 66% to $1.3 billion in the fourth quarter, well below what Wall Street had expected, and profits at Morgan Stanley slumped 40% to $2.2 billion, barely beating analyst projections. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and President Joe Biden are facing a showdown in their first major legislative clash since Republicans took control of the House, as they prepare to do battle over whether or not to increase the country's $31.4 trillion debt limit. Investment guru Catherine Austin Fitz with us. Catherine, $31 trillion? She's not there. Well, she was going to say that something had gone drastically wrong there in terms of the debt. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, by the way, warned that the U.S. will hit its cap. And once that happens, she will not be able to issue new debt without congressional action and approval. Unbelievable there. Russia will create new commands near Europe as it expands its military to 1.5 million soldiers amid deepening tensions with the U.S. and its allies over a Kremlin's invasion of the Ukraine. A Kremlin spokesperson said the military expansion came in response to the proxy war claimed by the U.S. and its allies that they're waging against Russia in the Ukraine. Here's Dr. John Curtis, onlinecolumnist.com. John, unbelievable situation.
George, it's an unending, unwinnable situation. And even the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that I don't really care for too much, but occasionally he says something that is insightful, said that the war is not winnable militarily. It must be won with a political settlement. So here we have, and you know that I've said this from the beginning of the war, I mean, really from the outset, that this was a proxy war. The U.S., using Ukraine as a fighting force, decided, as Biden stated, this was back in March in Warsaw, Poland, that President Putin should no longer remain in power. A month later, his defense secretary, Lloyd Austin, in Ramstein, Germany, said that the aim of the U.S. military was to degrade the Russian military to the point that it could no longer wage war. Now, George, if that's not a declaration of war by the United States against the Kremlin, against the Russian Federation, then what is? So from the outset of this war, this has been a vendetta. I don't know if many people remember the Syrian war that raged on for at least 8 years, actually is still going on. And that war was supported by Barack Obama and, yes, Joe Biden, who paid Syrian rebel groups, some of whom were al-Qaeda and ISIS, billions of dollars to topple Syrian President Bashar Assad in Damascus. In 2015, Russia entered the war, and the proxy war went south, and Bashar Assad is still the president of Syria. This war in Ukraine is a continuation of that vendetta that Biden has with Putin. The United States will not win this war. Ukraine will not win this war, no matter how many promises you hear from the young comedian turned president Volodymyr Zelensky, who continues to say that all they need are more tanks, more air defenses, and more arms and cash, and they will eventually defeat the Russian Federation.
That's not going to happen. You know
that has got to be extremely naive. This war must end. It must go to the peace table, and if it doesn't, all bets are off on the European continent.
I agree with you, John. It's got to be a negotiated settlement. Tom tells me Catherine Austin Fitz is back with us. Catherine, the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling, that's crazy.
Well, George, here's the thing. The time has come to face the fact that we don't need to issue debt to issue currency. The Treasury, for many things, not everything, but for many things, could issue currency and doesn't need to pile up all this debt. So it's time to face that we don't need a debt-based currency system. We need a currency system. And things, I think, are coming to a head. Now, part of the reason you're seeing a fight over the debt limit is you're watching a significant number of expenditures that are unnecessary. You know, the spending is really out of control. And so it's got to be brought back into some kind of balance, or else we're going to continue to have runaway inflation. So that's the question. Do you want to have runaway Treasury expenditures, or do you want to have runaway inflation? And if you're going to have runaway expenditures, you can't afford to pay a huge amount of sort of interest on debt that is completely unnecessary layer in the financial system.
Catherine, is the Federal Reserve going to continue to raise interest rates?
My guess is I think it's more likely than not that they'll bump once more in February. And then the question is, will they continue? Here's the problem. If you look at what's going on in the economy, are they going to be under pressure to do another pivot and more quantitative easing, at which point we're really going to have inflation? So there's a war now between inflation and printing money.
All right. Thank you. Catherine Austin Fitz does a great job. China's population fell last year for the first time in 6 decades, a historic turn that is expected to mark the start of a long period of decline in its citizen numbers, with profound implications for its economy and the world. The country's National Bureau of Statistics reported a drop of roughly 850,000 people. Their population is 1.41 billion people right now. Frequent visits to green spaces in cities, such as parks and community gardens, may be linked to lower use of certain prescription medications. Blood pressure, depression, anxiety, insomnia, and asthma seems to go away when people get out there and relax in parks. In a moment, the power of Mercury. We're going to be talking with astrologer Leslie McGuirk about the year ahead on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. George Norrie with you. Let me tell you about our special guest for the first couple hours. Leslie McGuirk is an internationally acclaimed astrologer who's breaking brand new ground in the world of mental health as she collaborates with Western-trained doctors to put forth a new vision of holistic healing. Her groundbreaking work is bridging the gap between how astrology explains the personality, whereas science is unable to do that. Leslie's been studying the system of astrological imprinting for more than 40 years, and her level of accuracy is undeniable. One of her books includes The Power of Mercury, her website linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Leslie, welcome to the program.
Thank you, George. It's nice to be back. How are you holding up with this latest Mercury retrograde?
Tell me about that. What does that mean, actually?
Well, it's happening to all of us a couple times a year. This particular one was very, very strong for many of us. Even for me, I normally say that we shouldn't get too hung up on these Mercury retrograde periods. But basically what it is, it's a time when the planet appears to be moving backward in the sky. It's really not moving backwards. The planets always go in the same direction at the same speed and always follow the same path. But during these periods, it's known to be true, and it is actually a fact, that communication don't go as planned, travel doesn't go as planned. So everyone should mark these periods off in their calendar because things can get funky. However, you have to be careful because it's not all bad. There are a lot of hidden blessings to a Mercury retrograde period. It's the time when you can actually, if you use the car metaphor, put your car into reverse, and someone could say, well, why is that good? You know, we want to go forward all the time. It's a really good thing if you need to parallel park, if you need to get out of your driveway or your garage. So it's a time to regroup, all the words that start with RE, regroup, regenerate, reconfigure. That's what we're supposed to be doing during Mercury retrograde. So they're incredibly important times, but they can be frustrating. Things with emails can get very wonky, telephones, your car. Usually it's nothing super serious, and some people who get so hung up on it, I always say to them, well, look at what just happened with the airlines during Christmas. That was not a Mercury retrograde period. So these things can happen at any time. So it's just that for certain times of the year, and especially for certain people, it depends where that Mercury sign is in what zodiac sign, whether or not it's going to really affect you in a difficult way. And then the other thing, which I talk a lot about in my book, The Power of Mercury, is you need to know if you were actually born during Mercury retrograde. Only 20% of the population has that, George. So for those of us, including myself, when it's Mercury retrograde, it's actually our good time. So when it goes direct, we feel the way other people do when it's retrograde.
We've come through the last couple of years, a pretty bouncy year, Leslie. How does 23 look like astrologically?
Astrologically, I would say the key word for this year is going to be transformation. Now, transformation can feel scary and wacky and very unsettling, but I see lots of signs of hope. But is this an easy year? Not exactly. It won't be as hard as what we've just come through. We've had a very, very difficult last couple of years, but we've got, I'll give you a few key themes for the year. The first one is that there are a bunch of planets that are going to be moving into new zodiac signs. And the biggest one that's happening is Pluto. And it takes Pluto about 20 years to get through a zodiac sign. So we have 20-year chapters. And it's just like reading a book. When you're done with a particular book and then you move on to the next one, it's a whole restart. So the first day that Pluto is going to give us an opening into a whole new way of life will be when we hit March 23rd. March is like a really intense month on many levels, but on March 23rd, for the first time, Pluto is going to dip into the sign of Aquarius. It's been in Capricorn for, over 20 years. This is a really big deal. It's only going to dip in until June 11th. So from March 23rd until June 11th, we're going to get a little taste of things. Then it's going to go back into Capricorn, where it's been for the last 20 years, until January 21st of 2024. And eventually it just stays there. And in Aquarius, it's going to pop back into Aquarius. So anyone who's a Capricorn, they're going to be saying, hallelujah, finally Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth that causes transformation, is moving out of their zodiac sign. And it's not just the sun sign, George. People need to understand that we have a moon sign, we have a Mercury sign. All of these things help to make up the individual, which is one reason why I'm not a big fan of just using sun sign astrology. You have to look at the whole conglomeration of where all the different planets are. So that's just one of the big things that's happening. Another thing that's massive is that Saturn has been in Aquarius for the last 2 years. So again, in March, on March 7th, it's going to go into Pisces, and it's going to be there until May 24th of 2025. So what this means in real language is that Saturn is like the taskmaster drill sergeant, and when he enters a zodiac sign, he brings this sort of no-nonsense approach to everything. And Pisces is, think about the fish under the ocean. Pisces can be a little, it can be hard to see things clearly because you're basically under the water. So when Saturn moves into Pisces, everything that's been confusing for us, there's been so much about misinformation and what's true, what's not true. There's going to become a much clearer lens that we're going to look through. And I think the craziness that we've been experiencing is no longer going to be working. We're going to have, I believe, a more humane approach to some things. So that's all the good news. But the tricky thing about this year is that we've got to go through basically feeling like we're going 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. So there are a lot of very significant changes. Those 2 I just mentioned were just Pluto and Saturn. The other big thing that's happening is that Jupiter And he's like, if you think of him like an actor, he would be like Santa Claus or something that's very expansive and brings you presents. It's been in Aries, and it's going to move into Taurus. So that will happen on May 16th, and it will be there for 1 year. So that's going to feel really good for Taurus people who have also been going through a lot with another planet that causes a lot of shakeups and upheavals, and that's Uranus. There's so much activity going on up in the skies for 2023. It's hard to keep track of how all of this is going to influence everyone, but all I can say is that there are radical changes that we're all going to be taking part in, and the job is just to try to stay as centered and as peaceful as you possibly can, and to realize that it's just weather. These are big, important changes that are happening to human beings on this planet, and we're all in it together. But the great thing about astrology is that as a cosmic meteorologist, when we see these patterns, we can at least then look at them and say, that's right, Leslie said 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We don't get so freaked out when we go 1 step back. We're still moving in a better direction. We've come out of the last couple of years, which were incredibly difficult, very unsettling for many people.
Better than 1 step forward and 2 steps back, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes, we have to focus on the fact that it is all moving in the right direction. And some people could say this is a very exciting time to be alive. The only way you can look at it as exciting is if you keep the emphasis in the right place, which is that we are moving towards being more humane. And I think that that's what we have to keep our focus on.
Leslie, what is a natal chart exactly?
Okay, so a natal chart, George, is basically like a piece of music. When a musician sits down at the piano or the guitar or whatever they play, they're looking at a pattern, and they're going to interpret that piece of paper with all those musical notes on it. When a child is born, when they take their first breath, they are basically born with a pattern, which is an electromagnetic pattern, like a piece of music. And that is what I call the owner's manual for the human being. And it is incredibly accurate. I would not be able to be doing the work I'm doing with many doctors, Western-trained doctors who have very, very scientific minds. There is a very definite scientific element to astrology, and it's all about how a person interprets. Just like in music, you could give a piece of music to one musician, it will sound totally different than if you go to someone else. So if you're born with your natal chart, which is your song, basically a good astrologer should be able to tell you how you were designed, how you were wired. And if we consider it like music, if something is too sharp, like if there are too many drums and too many cymbals and not enough flutes, it's almost like an orchestra pit. We're trying to get everything to be balanced out. And the most important thing is that you have to learn to like what you were born with. It's never going to change. Your natal chart stays with you your whole life, just like your owner's manual in your car glove compartment. That piece of paper in your box there in your car basically is only telling you the best way to operate your vehicle. You have free will. This is extremely important. These planets are not dictating what's going to happen to you. They're an influence. It's a navigational tool. And just like in the old days when people were out in the oceans trying to figure out how to get around, they used the stars to guide them. And that is how astrology should be used. It's a tool. You're still in control of your boat. You're still using your eyeballs and your head to figure things out. It's just a way to see the patterns so that you can react to them in a way that's the highest level possible. And even think about when the 3 wise men found baby Jesus. Those wise men were called the Magi, and Magi means astrologers. Astrologers used to be the highest level in society under the kings and the royalty, because an astrologer is able to see things that other people can't see, which is why I've used the gift and the magic of astrology to help people with a lot of health issues that regular Western medicine hasn't been able to help because they can't see from that very high perspective where the pattern is, where the pattern might be broken. Or where
Hold on for a second, Leslie. We're at a break. We'll come back and chat more about astrology next. We will take your calls with Leslie McGuirk next hour. She will even do some readings for us, so get ready for that. We'll be back with her with much more in just a moment on Coast to Coast. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, Leslie McGuirk. Well, Leslie, one of the many things we like about you is you're very positive about your outlook of astrology.
Yes, and I'm also very, very emphatic about the fact that it's not fortune-telling. It's just no different than a diagnostic person who looks at your car, and I think it's really important to realize that we have free will. We have influences that are with us, but there's a way to make our lives a lot easier if we know what we're dealing with, and that's why I think astrology, I call it the language of compassion, and one of the most beautiful ways to attain peace is to actually understand how to read an astrology chart, because once you see what kind of music you were born with or what the weather is like, astrology can give you a type of inner knowing that is very hard to attain in any other way. And it's why I'm so interested in teaching people how to read charts. I've got another beginner class starting on January 31st for 4 weeks, and I literally feel that it's important for me, because there's only one of me out there, so it's very important for me to teach people how I do this, because it's not something that you can learn from a book, and because I equate it with music, it's like people thinking they can learn how to read a book and understand how to play the guitar. It's something that you can't learn in those normal, quote-unquote, normal ways. You have to be able to play it. So because I have this background as an artist and as a writer and illustrator of children's picture books, I think I figured out a way to make it fun and to make it colorful and easy to understand using metaphor. I don't usually talk a lot in astrological language because it just goes in one ear and out the other for most people.
When we take calls next hour and you'll do some readings, what do you want from people? Do you need a birth month and day?
I need the birth date and year. For what we're doing now, it doesn't matter where they were born or what time, because I can't get that deep into it, but just the birth date and year would be great.
And a question, or are you just going to take over from there?
Well, if they have a question, usually that's what people start with, so it would probably be great if they did have a question. Okay. If not, I'm always happy to help in any way I can.
Lots of people are, my impression, that they're under a lot of stress, anxiety. Some people are depressed. What's going on?
Well, we've come through a very, very difficult time, and the world as we knew it actually came to an end when we had the COVID thing happening. And I remember I was on your show before COVID hit, and I said, something's coming down the pike in life as we know it's going to be a lot different. So we're still feeling the side effects of that period, and we are having a hard time settling down into this new reality where everything feels so heightened. Everything feels very angular and sharp, and I think that it's difficult to meditate when you're anxious. It's hard to think straight when you're depressed. So the key thing for me when people are struggling in this way, the most important thing that can help us is, I believe, understanding astrology, because once you can understand why you're reacting the way you are or why the current weather patterns are affecting you the way they are, it can help you in ways that are impossible to describe. I think about that gentleman who recently took his life, who was the producer with Ellen, Stephen Twitch Boss.
Yes.
I looked at his chart, and George, he did have two particular things in his chart that indicated some things he had struggled with in terms of his emotions. But the tricky thing is that when he took his life, the weather pattern on at that particular time was so hard for him that he probably just popped. I don't think he would have necessarily felt the urge to do what he did if he had understood from an astrological point of view that this was temporary. This was just weather, and it was hitting him in a really hard way. And I think if people can know what's going on, you can settle back into it. It's just like when you're driving your car, or maybe a better example is when you're on an airplane and you're stuck on the runway. When the captain comes on and tells you what's going on and tries to calm you down, it feels good. You feel better because you're getting some sort of higher view on the situation. But when you're left not knowing, which most people are left not knowing because they don't know how to read astrology, they get very upset and anxious because it is scary. This world is not easy to comprehend right now, but I think astrology is probably the best way to have peace of mind, and it even helps just in every day-to-day thing in life. I'll tell you one quick story about something that happened to me a couple years ago.
Sure.
It was the anniversary of a death of a friend of mine, and I was very upset, and I called a girlfriend trying to get comfort because I was really having a hard time. And she said, well, no, this is not a day to be sad. You should be happy that this person died quickly and they didn't suffer. And everything that I felt was completely discounted because in her mind she was trying to get me to switch gears and look on the happy side. But I wasn't in a happy place. This person ended up taking one of my astrology classes, and when she saw the way that I work, the way I deal with emotions, the way my brain works, it was very, very different than the way her brain works. So now our relationship is so much calmer and better because it's not that she's right and I'm wrong. It's just we all have different ways of being, and once you can see it, then you don't get as upset with other people or even with yourself because we don't get mad because a porcupine has quills. We don't get mad because a giraffe has a long neck. We accept the way things are designed when we can see it and understand it, and that's what astrology does for people. You can see it. It's very clear, and then you can sit back and accept things more easily.
What can astrology tell you? Just about everything?
Definitely just about everything. It can tell you how you were designed, most importantly. All of us are like cars, and some of us are Ferraris, and some of us are Toyotas, and some of us are trucks. And we need to understand that however we're designed, we're perfect just the way we are. But there's a high way of doing it or a low way, and we want to do the highest vibrational version of ourselves. So in the astrology chart, you can see how many of your tires are properly inflated. So those, in astrological language, are made up of elements. So there's fire, earth, air, and water. Most people are driving around in vehicles that have all four elements, but many of us, including myself, are completely missing an element. So I have absolutely no air in my chart at all, which doesn't mean that I'm an airhead or that I can't breathe. It just means that I'm either an expert in the area of air or I'm out of whack with it. And so for me, I get incredibly claustrophobic. I've had sinus surgery twice in my life. I now know that this is the element that I need to put into my life with intention in order to stay balanced. So it means being outside a lot where there's lots of air and space, and being in airplanes traveling is really good for me. So it's an important thing to know how you're balanced with those four elements. And the other thing astrology can do is tell you why you were born. It gives the entire purpose for your existence. And think of how important that is if you're dealing with a young person, like the astrologer who saved my life when I was 19. Mm-hmm. She basically, George, knew who I was. I didn't even really know who I was.
Yeah, she knew you better than you did.
Exactly. And so I started studying astrology at that moment because I thought at the deepest, most profound level, everything she said to me, and I still remember all of her words, I knew that she was right. And she said, Leslie, you're incredibly creative. What are you doing with your life? At that time, I wasn't doing anything creative because some teachers in high school or grade school had told me I had no talent and I couldn't draw. Well, guess what? The astrologer was right. I now have 20 children's picture books that I've sold all over the world and have been a designer for Takashimaya in Japan. They made over 1,500 products with my designs on them. And she also told me back then at age 19 that my creative work would first be picked up overseas. And sure enough, I was selling T-shirts out of the back of my car in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and wrote to Glamour magazine, and they did a story about me, and someone from Takashimaya in Japan called me up and said, we want to make you famous in Japan. So she was even right about that. And what's super cool is that there's something called an astrocartography map that an astrologer can look at, and it tells you the best places in the world to go for love or work, or if you want to write a book. And for me, the line that goes right through Tokyo is the place where you go for fame and fortune. And so I basically went from obscurity in New Hampshire to becoming a superstar designer in Tokyo. So even to that degree of accuracy, and I have so many stories about how accurate that astrocartography map is. It's incredibly useful to know. Like, think about someone who's trying to pick out what college they want to go to. There could be a place in the world that's completely perfect for that student, and astrology is just one more tool in the toolbox. It does not tell you how to live your life, and no one should ever allow planets to dictate what they do. You want to always go with your intuition and your heart and your brain, but you use it as a tool, and it's an incredibly useful thing that I'm so passionate about because it has totally defined my life and how I live, and I've seen it help so many people. I mean, all the clients that I've got, all the students that I've got, it changes how you look at the world, and to me that's like one of the most beautiful things that exist on this planet, and not enough people understand it. Most people are just reading their horoscopes and looking at what other astrologers are telling them they need to do for the next couple months. I don't really enjoy that type of astrology. I'd rather empower the individual and get them to be able to understand how to move forward in life. So I have a very different emphasis than probably most of the astrologers out there.
Can astrology be overused?
Yes, absolutely. There are many people who don't make a move without, looking in the paper at what some astrologer said they should do this week. It's too complicated for that to be that accurate, too, because every single person's astrology chart is so precise. It's just based on the date, time, and place of birth. A birth chart for someone born in China on your exact birthday at the exact same time is going to be totally different if you're born in New York City, because the sky in China is totally different. So all of the various different planets all combine to make up this beautiful music that you're born with. But when people just overuse astrology thinking that their sun sign is the thing that's going to determine everything about how they're supposed to move forward, it upsets me because it's not really the real deal of what astrology can be.
It's an amazing, would you call it a science?
I call it an esoteric science. So we have hard science, and then we have interpreted things like acupuncture. So acupuncture and astrology are very similar. Back, 50 years ago, people thought acupuncture was crazy. Now it's part of the medical system. So acupuncture is an interpreted science. You could go to 20 acupuncturists and have a different result. So it depends on who's doing it, and the same is true for astrology. It's an ancient science, and it's an interpreted science. So it's definitely as medically accurate as acupuncture can be, which is why I'm so interested in working with doctors and why doctors have been the ones finding me. I did not go looking for doctors who wanted to work with me. They found me because either they had a patient or a client who told them about me, and then they experienced what I could do for them, and then it just grew. And in one of my classes recently, I had 4 neurologists taking my Astrology 101 class, and it's because they understand that the brain and how we work, there's something very electrical about us. And the neurologist is seeing these patterns and realizing that astrology is similar.
Leslie's book is called The Power of Mercury. Her website is her name, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. We're going to take calls with her next hour, or you can ask her a question about astrology. Or if you want a reading, we will need your full birthday, month, day, and year. We'll pass that on to her, and she prefers if you ask her a specific question, and then she'll take it away from there. And this is amazing. But you've been doing this for over 40 years. How'd you start? What, were you 3 years old?
Yeah, I didn't know. I started when I was 19, and I'm 62 now, so that's a long time. And I also get nervous with people who set up shop as astrologers after just studying for a year or two.
Oh, you got to study more. Hold on for a second, Leslie. We're at the top of the hour. We'll be back and chat more and take calls. We're talking astrology with Leslie McGuirk this hour. We'll take your calls when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Leslie McGuirk as we're talking about astrology and take your calls. Leslie, you were talking about it takes more than a year to be a proficient astrologer.
Yes, so it's a little frightening if people have only been doing it for a few years. As I said, I've been studying it since I was 19, and one of the ways that I know I've gotten more proficient at this esoteric science is because I've read so many charts, and basically what's happened is that I see the patterns over and over again that I look for, and I think that that's one of the most useful ways to learn astrology again, to play it, to experience it, to work with real people over and over. And that's something that only can happen if you've lived long enough to look at all those different charts. So it's a little scary to think of people who've only been doing it for a couple years because it's such a deep and incredibly complicated science, and there are so many levels to it. It's like playing tic-tac-toe with 20 stories high and watching how everything moves together. And I think people should look at it as if you're going to a concert or a musician. Like Bruce Springsteen is going to be very different as a musician than someone who's just been playing the guitar for 2 years. And you can't take away that huge amount of time that was spent by Bruce Springsteen to master his craft. And that's what I think astrology is like, exactly the same.
Leslie, can it be dangerous in the wrong hands?
Absolutely. I have had people come to me and tell me that astrologers told them that their son was going to die in 2 years or that their kids would never be okay. I've had people coming to me saying that an astrologer told them they would never get married. I was once teaching at Camp Powerment, and they had hired a young astrologer because I said I couldn't teach and also do readings for people, and I highly suggested that they not hire this young astrologer because I hadn't vetted her, and Georgia was unbelievable. She did a bunch of readings for people. They all came up to me afterwards crying because this young astrologer had said things that really scared people, and it should never be like that. If you're reading a piece of music, if you're loving that people have a very unique imprint, and there's nothing good or bad about anything, an astrologer with the wrong words can do a lot of damage. I had to then give all of those people who were crying a free reading because I was so upset that they were damaged by what that astrologer had said to them. So, yes, it's a little frightening in the wrong hands, but like anything, like a knife, it's great for cutting food or bread, but you can also hurt somebody with it. And same thing with acupuncture. You poke somebody and hurt them doing that too, so you have to be very careful.
Let's take some calls. I'm going to give you the birth date first, Leslie, so you could get a little running start, and then we'll bring them in. So we're going to August 4th, 1932. August 4th, 1932. Patrice is with us, first-time caller out of Yakima, Washington. Hi, Patrice.
Hi there. How are you?
Welcome to the program. Good to have you with us. What would your question for Leslie be?
Okay, well, I just turned 90 in August.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's a miracle. Worst year of my life so far. I got totally scammed by somebody and lost every penny I had.
Oh, no. How much was it, if I can ask?
$25,000.
Oh, Patrice.
I know, it's horrible, isn't it? I was very foolish, but I did it. Now I need to know what's going to happen. I don't know if it will help if you know that I have a Pisces rising and a Virgo moon.
Yes, I see that you definitely have a Virgo moon. You actually you're just a really nice person, and you have usually a pretty upbeat kind of outlook on life, but I have a feeling that this particular person who hurt you really did you in, as you said, for you to mention that this was one of the worst things that's ever happened in your life. A lot of it's because you're a nice person, and vulnerable, nice people are like a deer in the woods. You know, they can get hunted. You definitely have been under an aspect of having a person lie to you. And that aspect is finally moving off, so that's good. So you're right, this year has not been that easy for you, but I believe you're going to be fine. It's just try not to stay in the trauma zone of what happened. It's an unfortunate thing. You were basically bamboozled by someone who didn't tell you the truth.
All right, good luck, Patrice, especially with this being just January. We've got 11 more months to go for her.
Right. Well, she's going to – the worst is over. But this is, again, George, if she had an astrological consultation, I could have told her, be really careful during this time. There's the good chance that someone's going to come into your life who's not thinking clearly and could be lying to you. So – you just have to be prepared.
Do you think every major decision should be done with some kind of astrology behind it?
I believe that would be beneficial. I think that it would be silly to schedule a major surgery or a wedding or even start a company. You can do an astrological chart for the birth of your company. So why not try to make it as auspicious as possible? But there are times when you don't have a choice. If it's an emergency, you just do the surgery.
You just got to do it, yeah.
Yeah.
Next up, let's go to Doc Petaluma. Let me give you the birth date, May 3rd, 1958.
Okay.
Doc, Petaluma, California. Hey, Doc, welcome.
That's me.
Yes, sirree. How you been?
Pretty good. Just a little wet up here in Northern California.
Yeah, it hasn't started. It's raining. It's been raining here for a couple of days, too, down in Southern California. What is your question?
I'm just general, when that's going to be a good year or not.
Okay.
Okay, so have you ever had your chart read before?
Never.
Never. Okay. So here's the thing I want to tell you. You're a combination of sort of sweet and sassy at the same time. Verbally, you can be quite intense with your words. Like you say it as it is, right? You don't hold back, correct?
Exactly.
All right. But internally, you're actually incredibly intuitive and very sensitive. But verbally, when you use your language in a way that's a little sharp, sometimes people can get a little feisty with you. And you've got the wounded healer, Chiron, is sitting on your brain coming up for this year. So you got to be a little careful with words. Just know that you definitely have a natural tendency to be a very direct person, but you just want to slow that down a little bit for this year. The other thing that's going on is because you're a Taurus, you've had Uranus, the planet of unexpected events, and the planet that makes you feel like you're living inside of a pinball machine. It's been right on your sun. So that's not the easiest thing for a Taurus. Think about a Taurus person. The symbol is the bull. Bulls like to just sit in the field or stand in the field eating grass. They don't really like change. Well, this planet is saying you got to move, you got to change things up. It's a little bit agitating. I would imagine you've felt a bit agitated for the last year. It's moving off, by the way, so that's good. It's not going to be as intense this year, but it moves slowly. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good news.
All right,
yeah,
Doc.
It's moving off. It's moving off. And then the other thing I want to tell you is that not until about 6 months from now, your Saturn is going to be hitting your Mars, your male energy. So it's really, really important that you take care of your body. Make sure you go to the dentist, or if you have any health things that you haven't taken care of before. The universe is saying, make sure it's like your car. It hits 50,000 miles, go get a checkup. Just do that, or make sure that you're exercising. If you're not, then your body might rebel a little bit. Are you exercising at all?
He hung up, Les.
Oh, he did. Okay.
And what about astrology charts for pets?
Oh, you can definitely do that if you know what day they were born. You might not know the time. You can still get a very accurate reading just from the date and the year. But the pet, if you get it at the Humane Society, you don't know when they were born, then, of course, you can't do their astrology chart. But, yes, an animal has a personality. They have a piece of music that they were born with as well. And what you want to do is see whether or not that animal's piece of music is compatible with yours. So in a family, like let's say everybody's got the feeling tone of classical music to their chart, and then you get a puppy who's a rap artist, it's going to cause a little bit of conflict. So you got to make sure that everything is, we want things to be as smooth and as easy as possible. That's always the way I like to go.
Have you ever told somebody not to get married on a certain date and they did and that fell apart?
No, I've never had that happen. Most people, if I give them suggestions, they're going to listen to it. I've got a pretty accurate track record. I've also been really good at predicting when people are going to get pregnant. There are a lot of women who suffer from infertility issues, and sometimes the simplest things can help people get pregnant. One of the most basic things that people never think about is the importance of drinking water. So I had a client who was having trouble getting pregnant, and she never drank water. And I said, well, just think about it in nature. If you put a seed in the ground and you don't water it, is it going to grow? No. So your whole body, every cell in your body is starving for water, including wanting to have a baby. So sometimes it gets as simple as that.
Interesting take. Next up, let's go to Feb 6, 1962. 2/6/1962. We're going to Brian in Indianapolis. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, George. Good morning. How are you?
Good to have you with us.
Yes, sir. Hey, listen, today's Chris's birthday. So, hey, Leslie, we enjoy reading your newsletters that we get from you. And
good.
My wife and I we've been together 20 years. We've been married 18, and she's my soulmate. And we are in tune with the universe, and our vibrations are always positive and high. Let me tell you a story here that happened Friday the 13th. I went to get my DOT physical for my CDL license, and I got my blood pressure checked, and my blood pressure came out 118/72.
That's good.
My wife's birthday, which is my wife's birthday today.
Happy birthday, Chris.
Yeah, so that's how in tune we are with the universe. But I'm just kind of curious about what you foresee for this year for me.
Okay, so Brian, let me just tell you, you have a really unusual, very, very otherworldly chart. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets in Aquarius. That's very, very unusual. So you're super out there. Think about Aquarius as being the air sign that's very, very eccentric and unusual, but very, very evolved with the spiritual realm for sure. So it's pretty cool to see a chart like yours. All right, so you want to know what's going to happen this coming year. Let's look. So let's see here. You've got Saturn has been in Aquarius, as I said, for the last 2 years. So you have been definitely restructuring your life, and that's going to be moving off in March. So you're going to feel a whole lot of differences in how you approach life once it moves out of Aquarius. But then it's going to hit your moon. That'll happen probably in about 6 to 8 months from now. So is your mother still alive?
No, ma'am. She passed away in 2016.
Okay, so the moon represents your emotions and your mother. Your moon is in Pisces, so you're very intuitive, very sensitive, sweet guy. When Saturn comes and sits on your moon, there's usually some sort of emotional thing that's, it could be heavy, but don't freak out about that. It could also be beautiful, too. Sometimes when this happens, there's a wedding, and, you gain a son-in-law because your daughter gets married. So it's an emotional time, but it doesn't have to be negative. I don't want you to freak out about that. But there's something happening to you emotionally in about 6 months from now. And then Pluto is going to be entering Aquarius. So all of those 6 planets you have in Aquarius, you're coming into probably one of the most interesting next 10, 20 years of your life, when you're going to be even more interested in spiritual, metaphysical things than you ever were before. So you're going to have a great time with that.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to retire hopefully in about 6 years, and I'm going to have plenty of time to do all that.
And sit back and listen to Coast, Brian, right?
Awesome. Yes, sir. Hey, ain't nothing like listening to you guys live or being a Coast insider.
You got it, my friend. Be well. Great reading.
Thanks, Brian.
Since you've been doing this, Leslie, and we've been doing it a long time now, what has been one of the most satisfying aspects of astrology for you?
For me, it's been helping people with impossible situations that no one could figure out, especially trauma issues. I'm sort of an expert on figuring out how trauma has influenced the individual. Once we figure out where the problem is in the chart, then I can help them recalibrate the chart so they don't stay stuck looping in the trauma zone. So I think it's incredibly rewarding to see how I've changed people's lives. Like, one story I could tell you is that I had this couple. They were very upset with their 16-year-old son, who was lying on the couch and he was not doing anything. He was apathetic. And they were type A, highly successful, wealthy people who were disgusted that their only child was this slug on the couch. And they had tried everything, therapists and counselors, and nobody knew how to help this kid. And they finally turned to me. Neither of them believed in astrology, but they liked me, and they thought, hey, we'll give it a try. So I look at the kid's chart, and I saw that the parents were just like 2 red-hot Ferraris. They were all fire, 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 and their son was nothing but water. So what happens elementally when you put fire and water together? They put each other out. The fire evaporates the water, and the water puts out the fire. So the elements in this family were not sympathetically organized. So I basically realized that these fire parents, the only thing that fire people really like is action. They think of what a forest fire does. It goes into the woods and it burns up every tree, and it keeps wanting to move and move and eat and eat. Well, water is different. They have a completely different outlook on life. So I realized that this kid, the only way he was going to be looking good in his parents' eyes was if he got moving, and his element was water. So I told them they need to get him in the pool. He needs to start swimming. He's like a natural at that. No one had thought of that, and they said he's not that good of a swimmer. I said, I don't care. Get him in the water. And so they did. Within a year, George, he was like one of the top swimmers in the state of Florida. Within 2 years, he was winning so many swim meets that when he went to go to apply to colleges, he got into Tufts University, which is a tough school to get into. And
that's why they call it Tufts.
Yeah, exactly. This kid turned into a Greek god. He was like this chiseled body. He was proud of himself.
An Adonis, right?
Yeah, he was. And simple solution to a very complicated problem. That's what I love about astrology. And then another example is a woman who was really sick for 6 years. Nobody could figure it out. The doctor at NYU who knew about me said, look, Leslie, I can't help her. I don't know what's the matter with her. In 1 hour, I knew exactly what the problem was. This woman now would follow me to the ends of the earth because she's healthy. She's no longer in pain. And sometimes it's very easy for some astrologers, not all, but to see the exact place where the origination point of the problem is lying in that person's chart.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, Leslie, and come back and take final calls with you in just a moment. Leslie McGuirk, our special guest. Her website is her name, linked up at coasttocoastam.com, and her book is called The Power of Mercury, Understanding Mercury Retrograde and Unlocking the Secrets of Astrological Communication. Next hour, Kelly Sullivan Walden joins us to tell us how to turn a crisis into a magical thing. So we'll talk with her about that. When we take calls with Kelly, share some of your stories, your tragedies that you've turned around. That would be fascinating. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with Leslie McGuirk. We're going to take your final calls. Leslie, they keep piling up. You could do this for 10 hours. You know that?
I do know that.
And by the way,
looking for answers.
Through your website, can people make appointments with you?
Yes, they can go on my website and they can just book it all online. There's an online calendar, and if they have any problems, they can just email us, and my assistant can help them too. So we're here for people. So they just have to be a little patient. It's going to be first come, first serve. So, but we're here for them.
I bet you're filling up already, aren't you?
Yes, I've been checking them out during the breaks, but that's good. I'm happy. I love your listeners. Many of them have actually become good friends of mine, and I think that most of the people who listen to your program are deep thinkers and on a spiritual path, so they're a pleasure for me to work with.
Let's go to the phones. Here we go to August 13th, 1973. Maria in Illinois. Hello, Maria. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call.
Very welcome.
I just wanted to add that I was born 1:16 p.m. Some sources say I have Scorpio rising. A few say Sagittarius rising. So just a little bit of a backstory. The last 3 to 4 years of my life have been like literally the worst years possible. I was in an accident twice within 2 months back in late 2021. I've been without a car since then. I need to get a car. I've been pretty much trapped at home. I've lost the eyesight, started losing my eyesight in my one eye, the right eye, about 3-4 years ago. Just a lot of bad things have happened. I've never been lucky in love. I never seem to attract the guys that I want, and the ones that want me I don't want. But recently, I've been having problems with Section 8. It's a voucher program that helps you when you're low income.
Right? Yeah.
And they want to kick me off the program because they claim that I have too much stuff in my apartment, which I've been on this program for 26 years, and I've never been failed for an inspection due to this. This is like the first time ever, and I'm in extreme, immediate danger of losing Section 8 financial assistance.
How much is that, Maria, by the way?
Well, I live in a very, very small little town, but what they were paying last year was like $146. I still paid most of the rent.
That's all they give you?
Well, because of my income, it's not like they were paying half of it. They were paying like maybe a quarter to a third of it, but I still paid more of it. But I need a much, much bigger place, but I've had health issues. I'm not strong enough. I feel like at my age I'm too old to move, and I need a much bigger place, but I don't really want to move just because it would take me forever, and I don't have a support system or friends. Or I desperately need a car. I miss driving so much. I had a little bit of money from the insurance, but nobody took me to look for another car, and that's starting to dwindle away.
Are you allowed to drive with your vision issues?
Yeah, I still have a license, yeah. I was just wondering, because all these horrible, weird, bad freak things have happened in the last 4 years. Will anything ever get any better for me? I know that last year was a personal year of 9 back in 2022.
All right, well, let's have Leslie take a look. 8/13/73.
Okay, so listen, you've had Saturn on your moon. Your moon is in Aquarius, so the last 6 months in particular have just made you feel very heavy, but it's moving off. And I'm going to tell you that you are 100% supposed to be moving. So I know you just said all the reasons you don't want to, but it's actually going to be one of the best, most freeing, amazing things that's happened to you in a long time. So it's a little bit like driving a car. When you have to shift, if you have a manual transmission, when you go from fourth gear to fifth gear, you have to put the clutch in and go into neutral. That never feels good because you feel like you have no control. That's where you are right now. You feel like you have no control, and you're scared because you've been in a spin cycle of this trauma going on, and yet one of the most important things for you is to get yourself into the next gear and to be open to moving, because it's going to make a huge difference in your life. A lot of the reasons why some of this heavy stuff has been going on is that you maybe have been fighting the weather patterns a bit, and this move is actually going to be fantastic. You even said you need a bigger place. That's exactly what the universe has in store for you. And in relationships, you've just ended an 8-year cycle where you've had nothing but weird stuff happening for your body and with work and everything. It's just now moved into the area of partnerships. So during the next 8 years, the focus is more on love and romance. So things are definitely shifting. The worst is over for you, for sure. So just don't get hung up on feeling like you're going to stay stuck in that same place. I think you're definitely moving.
All right, good luck, Maria. I hope everything works out for you. Keep in touch with Tom. He might have some things for you. Leslie, you do a great job for people.
Well, thank you. I feel like I'm just an instrument, and I'm here to help people who are suffering. I think that my life was saved by an astrologer, so if I can pay it forward, I will. And trust me, George, this was not a profession I was interested in having. It was a particular skill that I developed out of a need to figure out myself and in order to make sense of things that were very complicated and actually quite difficult for me. And I found astrology to be the only thing that brought me peace during my 20s and 30s, which were tough times. And I realized when looking at my own chart that the higher version of my chart is to be a healer and a teacher. And
you still there? Oh, we lost her, Tommy. Call her back. We got to get her back in. We got too many folks who still want readings, and we got about 6 minutes left. Let's go to Mary in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We'll just chat for a little bit. Mary, go ahead.
Thank you for the gift you are to humanity. You're wonderful. Thank you.
Greatly. How have you been, Mary?
Well, it's been a tough year. And, I just feel like underappreciated by my daughter, by my job. I'm a Capricorn, and I feel like I'm a giver. I'm a nurse, and feeling underappreciated at the job too. Although I'm a very good nurse, and I've been told that. But and then I give a lot. So, but I still try to be positive. But I feel like sometimes when I listen to your show and people say maybe you have a negative entity, you picked up I feel like sometimes I wonder, maybe I'm cursed because some people you can be so nice, and sometimes they, like my daughter, her husband is very close to his mother, and I have 2 little grandsons, and I'll bring all the side dishes, and his mom will show up and bring nothing, and then when it's her birthday, they all go out, and my birthday is like comes and goes, and a card, and that's okay. His mother's older, but still, sometimes it hurts.
So what would your question be for Leslie? And Leslie's, the birthday is January 7, 1964. What's your question,
Well,
Mary?
am I should I stay working in the hospital? And I work the night shift. One of the reasons I stay, I don't know, sometimes I feel stuck, but it's great money, and my house needs a lot of work, so I could make the money, but it's draining sometimes. And it's hard work, but I do like it. But sometimes you feel like you can't do enough. I'm a registered nurse.
All right. What advice, Les?
Okay, so one of the imbalances in your chart has to do with the elements. You have plenty of earth element. You have actually 6 earth planets. So you're very practical, very grounded, very sane, and you're also emotionally a sensitive human. You don't have a mean bone in your body, so you actually make an excellent nurse. The problem with the chart here is that you're very low in fire. So what happens is that sometimes it's probably difficult for you to stand in your truth, and people can sometimes take advantage of you. So getting feisty is not usually your first line of defense. Am I correct?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So what you want to do is, in order to balance out this chart, we've got to heat you up a bit. We got to make sure that you're getting your heart rate up. And believe it or not, low fire people, they actually need to sweat, and a lot of times they hardly ever do that. But if
they need sweat. Okay.
Do you ever do exercise where your cardio gets up and you?
Oh yeah, I used to run. A lot from miles and miles, but not in the past few years.
Right. Okay, that's the difference. So if you want your life to get more in balance, you got to get back to what you were doing a few years ago. Because as soon as you do that, it's sort of like when you're driving a car, and if you have a flat tire, you go and put air in it, and then you're okay. So with you, the fire element, if it's not quite right, you can feel like you're kind of consumed by all the other elements. So that can help you a lot, because you're a really nice person, and sometimes nice people don't get treated as well as people who are sassy and a little edgier and meaner. So just protect yourself. Just make sure you take care of your body.
Fire.
All right. Good luck, Mary. Hope everything works out for you. Let's take one more quick call if we can. We'll go to Annie in Porter Ranch, California, 925-51. West of the Rockies. Annie, go for your question.
Yes. I was wondering about my love life.
Love life, Leslie.
Yes.
Okay. So September 25th, 1951. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. All right. So listen, you have an interesting combination here when it comes to relationships. You love to be in love. But sometimes, because you're a Libra and you've got Saturn right next to your sun, sometimes people might perceive you as being a little bit hard to get to know or a little bit aloof. Has anyone ever said that to you?
Many times.
Okay, so my dear, listen, don't worry about being the way that you are. Just realize that you're like a bird up in a tree, and you want relationships. You need it emotionally. Your moon is in Cancer. You want to be connected. But what's happening is people aren't feeling that from you. What they're feeling is that you're like a bird up in a tree, and they're like a little puppy dog on the ground, and they're like saying, are you going to come down here and play with me? And you're like, no, I think I'm going to stay up here. I'm more comfortable. So that's your natural tendency. You're designed to be this very sweet person who wants connection, but you're up in the tree, and we got to get you to fly down and be vulnerable, be open, because you definitely have some nice transits happening this year that can change everything about relationships. But we've got to change you first and make you a little bit more easier to get to know. So I can give you a little homework assignment that you're not going to like, but I highly suggest you try it. Make sure you meet one new person every day. I don't care if it's a child or an elderly person, male, female. Just get used to saying the name of introducing yourself to a new person every day. Like even when you go to the grocery store, just say the name of the cashier. Most of us don't do this, and yet if you do it every day, you start to get more open and friendly, and then people will react to you in a different way, because that Saturn next to your sun is kind of like, imagine having a drill sergeant next to you wherever you go. Sometimes it doesn't feel that approachable. But we don't have to make him a drill sergeant. He can become the wise teacher. And that's, again, the higher version of your chart is for you to be this elegant person who has wisdom, not someone who's like making people feel like they need to stay away.
Okay.
All right. Good luck
Does that help?
Hope that works.
Good.
Hope that works. Leslie, we're almost out of time, but I want you to give out your website very quickly.
Sure, it's just my name, www.Lesliemcguirk, LeslieMcGuirk.com.
Leslie, keep in touch with us, okay?
I will. Thanks, George.
You take care of yourself. We'll be back in a moment with Kelly Sullivan Walden as we talk about a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Ever have a nightmare? In a moment, Kelly Sullivan Walden joins us. We're going to talk about several things, including a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and also your nightmares, in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Kelly Sullivan Walden with us, also known as The Dream Doctor, is an award-winning best-selling author of a number of books. Her latest, A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste, just came out. A dream expert, certified clinical hypnotherapist, inspirational speaker, workshop facilitator, Kelly holds a doctorate degree in interfaith studies, and her unique approach to dream work led her to consult with thousands of individuals, from Fortune 500 executives to celebrities to stay-at-home folks. She hosts the Kelly Sullivan Walden podcast show, founder of the DreamWork Practitioner Training. It's an online professional development program empowering people to incorporate dream work into their careers. And she happens to be one of our favorite guests. Hello, Kelly. Welcome back.
George, Norrie. Oh, man, it's great to be back with you.
Great book, by the way. It just showed up. I got an advanced copy, and good luck with that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this feels like an important one, maybe the most important book I've written so far.
And timely, too, because a lot of people are going through these crises, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. It just seems like it is a relatively dark time for many of us, and we, it can, based on my near-death experience that I've shared with you in the past,
yeah.
I'm aware that it's not like there is such thing as bottom. Things can get darker if we stay in victim mode. It's kind of like how the shark in water can, if we start bleeding, it kind of can feed on that. So it's important for us to turn about face and reclaim the power that we do have to stop the spiral and turn toward what we can make of our crises. It's an opportunity, just as the Chinese character says. It's danger, but also opportunity. And if we know that, then we can move whatever we're going through. We can open up to something that could be potentially life-changing and even a great blessing in disguise.
We'll talk about dreams and nightmares a little bit later on tonight with you, Kelly. But your title of your new book is A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. What does that mean?
Well, it's kind of a funny thing because most people are shocked by the last word. They're like, a crisis is a terrible thing, period. But to waste, wait, what? I've found, personally, I think whatever is true for us personally is true on some level collectively. And I know for myself, I've had a charmed life in many ways, but I've also had more than my share of tragedies, lots of deaths of people that I love, and also just, some pretty rotten, awful relationships in my past. And I realized there was a time in my, not that long ago, a few years ago, in a session with a client, I was kind of trying to help them get through a nightmare, and it wasn't working. What I was saying wasn't working, so I decided to tell them a personal story about a personal nightmare that I had gone through and the way that I had transformed through it. And then the light went on in her eyes, and all of a sudden I realized people learn a lot more from me when I get really real about what I've been through and how I got through it, rather than just pelting them with platitudes from the mountaintop. So I started writing about these stories that were like my worst, most horrific stories, but the things that I learned the most from. And I eventually turned that into a book, and it's a little frightening, actually, to have these very revealing stories be out there. But I'm hoping that they will be of service to some people, and it's worth it if it is.
It's interesting to transform tragic experiences into what you call magic.
Yeah, and just even, it does seem like a radical notion. In the middle of a tragic situation, you don't want to necessarily tell somebody, hey, there's magic here, look for it. You know, you're going to get punched in the face if you do that. But in the back of your mind, it might not hurt to know there could be a blessing in disguise. I was on an airplane headed to Colombia a few years ago, and I was writing about the nature of transforming the tragic into magic and how it's possible, how there was an article in Time magazine that was written about PTSD, which everybody knows, post-traumatic stress disorder. But this article, they were talking about how few people know about PTG, which is the nature of post-traumatic growth, people that go through horrible things but come out of it on the other side tremendously better off, wiser, more compassionate, and deeper. And I was writing about my own experiences with that, only to arrive at the Columbia airport and promptly have my purse stolen from me.
Oh, no. How'd that happen?
I turned around, and I looked the wrong way, and somebody snatched it. I mean, it was probably planned. Somebody distracted me. But it was, and I realized not only was it my purse, but it was my laptop with several books that I had been writing. It was on there. Yeah, you know that feeling. And my passport and my identity. Like, talk about my identity being stolen. It was gone. And so in that moment, in the back of my head, I was kind of cursing myself, like, oh, my God, I can't believe I was just writing about a tragedy turning into something magical. Like, I was kind of mad at myself for having written that, but I couldn't get that notion out of my mind. What if there's a blessing here? What if? And maybe I'll find it. And eventually I did find a blessing because I got to spend a month. This might sound strange, but I spent 1 month without my laptop and without my phone, things that I was so attached to.
They're like extensions of your body.
Yes. Could you imagine somebody taking those things, like having no access to the world for a month? And it was something I would have never tried to do on my own. But by the end of it, I mean, I feel like I'm a different person because I feel like now I have my phone, I have a laptop, but they don't have me. And in the past, without realizing it, they did have me. And I think a lot of us, it's like that for them. So there's a blessing in it that I can have these things without feeling like I'm at one with them, because I'm not. I can turn them off. I can walk away from them and not feel my heart palpitating. And I see people around me attached at the hip to these things, and I'm grateful for the thief that stole my phone and laptop.
And I assume you never got them back.
No, God, no, they were gone, baby, gone. It was quite a bit of a nightmare, but I did look for the blessings in disguise, and I found a laundry list of them. And I wouldn't want to go back to that moment, but I wouldn't change a thing because I did grow deeply as a result of that opportunity.
You have a method that you call ogle. What is that?
It's a very strange sounding thing, I know, because ogle, we don't think of that as a very positive thing. It seems like a kind of a lecherous sort of thing. But there's an artist that has done...
Sounds like a stalker or something.
Exactly. Well, part of it is when I was in my younger years, I had been stalked, I had been ogled, and in some way now it's like I'm turning the tables, not like I'm going to stalk or ogle somebody, but there's an artist that I work with, Rasuli, who did the artwork for my Hero's Journey Oracle cards and Dream Oracle cards, many of my Oracle cards he's done the work for. And I said one day to him, "You are such a great artist." And he said, "I am not an artist. I am an ogler." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "I look at the things that everyone misses. I see the beauty in the details, and I get off on them." And I thought, wow, okay, that's a little intense. But I thought, wow, what if I could be an ogler of the transformational variety? So that stuck with me. And then years later, as I started to write this book, I had this aha moment where all of the modalities that I've used to transform my tragic into magic, my tragic circumstances into magic, I could condense into 4 steps that happen to spell as an acronym OGLE. So it stands for the first thing you do when you're in the middle of a tragedy. you give yourself permission to be in what's offending you. You can be in the, oh, this is horrible, this is sad, this is painful. You let yourself feel the human feelings, whatever it is you're feeling. Don't mask it, don't hide it, don't tense up. Let yourself feel what's offended, what is offensive to you and what has been offended. And then once you get all that out of your system, you have to make the leap to start to look for what's good. That's the G in Oval. What's good or what's potentially good or what might be good. Like when I got my purse stolen, I had no idea what was going to be good about it, but I was at least like a detective on the hunt for what could be good. And in that way, the circumstance started to lose its power over me. And then we move to the L, which stands for the looking glass. It's the mirror. You ask yourself, and this is a really hard question to ask, but this is where dream work comes in handy, because in dreams, when we interpret dreams, I was taught in the books and in the teachings of the late, great Carl Jung, he said to perceive everybody and everything in your dream as if they were you. So as you practice doing that with dreams, it was easier for me to start doing that in my waking life. So I had to ask myself, how am I the thief that steals my time? How am I the thief that stole my attention, that steals my precious vital energy, putting it on what isn't most important? There's a beautiful person standing in front of me, but instead I'm wanting to look at my phone. I am more the thief than any person who stole my purse. So it's looking at ourselves, how do I do that same thing, so that we can move to the last letter in the formula, which is E, and that stands for elevate. Then how can I elevate my circumstance, even if it's just in an incremental, microscopic way? So in my case, I decided when I come home from Columbia, when I finally get a new laptop and phone, I'm not going to be chained to them like I was before. I'm going to allow myself to have breaks from them. And when I'm actually in front of a human, I'm going to put my phone away and turn it on silent so that I can actually be present with my life, so I don't have my life pass me by because I'm so absorbed in technology. So that's OGLE. What's offensive about it? What's good about it? What's in the looking glass? And then how can I elevate my circumstance?
What is one of your most incredible stories out of your new book, A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste?
Oh, well, that all depends on your taste, George. It runs the gamut. But I think for this audience, I mentioned my near-death experience. In some way, one of the most gruesome, horrific things that we deal with is death, or the fear of death. And I did have a mini-death experience in 2008. I left my body and went to the other side. My physical body ended up on a gurney. I had the paramedics, putting I was plugged in every way. They were measuring me. I had flatlined. And I went to the other side and saw the most gorgeous, first of all, actually, honestly, the first thing I saw it was like a hallway that led to a very dark place, because I was so afraid. It was as if my fear was propelling me into darkness that had no bottom. And I thought, okay,
like a bottomless pit, huh?
Yeah. So really, there is no bottom. That could go on and on. But I decided to become curious about what was on the other side of that tunnel. And immediately, it was as if I turned an about face and was propelled toward the light. And based on my curiosity, based on my wondering, what could be on that, what could be the equal and opposite aspect of that fear? And I was propelled into such beauty, and it was nothing like, it was similar to the best things I had ever experienced on Earth, but times a million. So it was, I got answers to every question I'd ever had. I wanted to understand about all the reasons why the horrible things happen to good people, and I felt satisfied. I got my answers, and it was wonderful. And I don't recommend that people try to take themselves out early, but I want people to know that what I learned from that experience was that when it is time, and it will be everybody has their time, it's something that is to be embraced. It's not something to fear. It's something to enter into with a lot of joy and a lot of it's kind of like a reward for having been through a war. In some way, this life that we're living in is very much a war zone. It's a tough world that we live in. It is full of jagged edges, and it is dense and heavy. But if we stop and we drop our fear of death, it doesn't have to be so difficult. We could actually walk through this life and have a lot more joy, which is what I've come back with, a lot more appreciation of life and a lot more appreciation of the precious moments we have, because they are fleeting and few, and it will be over all too soon, and my God, we don't want to miss it. So that's one of the more harrowing stories in the book.
We're going to talk about dreams after the break with Kelly Sullivan Walden, and when we take calls next hour, Kelly, will you do some dream interpretations for people?
I would love to, George. Are you kidding?
You love
my
that.
Joy.
Is that you, by the way, on the cover?
Yes, it is, in the mud.
I was going to say, are you on the beach or in a puddle or what?
I am in an actual mud puddle. It is a true mud. There's no Photoshop in that picture.
I kept looking for oceans in the background, and I'm not seeing it.
Somebody thought it was a big chocolate mousse or hot chocolate, and no, it's mud. It's actual mud.
Why are you in mud?
It was the vision I had. When my publisher said, "Hey, do you want to be on the cover of this one?" I thought, "Oh my God!" Immediately, I saw myself kind of doing the backstroke in mud. But I'm not doing the backstroke. I'm doing sort of the front stroke, drinking tea while I'm in a pile of mud. And believe me, I didn't want to step into the puddle, but some part of me, I guess it was my inner child, that was like, "How many times as an adult do we get to just splash around in a mud puddle? Get in there, Kelly. You could do it. It's not going to kill you." And once I got in, they had a hard time pulling me out. It was so much
That's
fun.
funny. Did they spray you off later?
Once I got home, but it was in my neighborhood, so all my neighbors got to see me. They call me the creature from the Black Lagoon.
It looks like it's quicksand.
It does. It is, and believe me, no Photoshop. This is
the real thing.
This is the real thing. That is mud in my hair. It's mud on my arms. Yeah.
It's mud everywhere.
It's mud everywhere. You'll have to join me one of these days, George, for a nice mud bath. You would love it. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Next lifetime.
Next lifetime. That's something. How was the tea, by the way?
It's delicious. Oh, a little bit of mud, a little, very earthy.
I've never been a tea person, but
no?
A lot of people love it.
Oh, my heavens. Well, I've got to make you a good cup of tea. I'll convert you, George.
Slowly and steadily.
Yes, happily.
How did you get involved as the Dr. Dream?
A newscaster in Santa Fe, New Mexico called me Dr. Dream. I didn't call myself that because at the time, that was before I'd gotten my doctorate, but I was a certified clinical hypnotherapist who had written a couple of dream books, and they said, "Welcome to the show, Dr. Dream." And I said, "Oh, I kind of like that alliteration." Okay. And then some people started calling me that after that, and I like a good nickname. So I went with it. And of course you can't go around calling yourself that until other people call you that enough. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to don that nickname. It's easier to call me that than a certified clinical hypnotherapist.
That's right? True. And this book just came out, the Crisis book, didn't it?
It came out today, George. You are my first radio interview. You are my first. You are the first, and I hope not the last. But you are the first.
You'll have many, to be sure. All right, we're going to come back in a moment with Kelly Sullivan Walden and talk about nightmares, and then we'll take calls next hour on Coast to Coast AM. Next hour, we'll take your calls with Kelly Sullivan Walden. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. We'll talk about that and nightmares when we come back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Kelly Sullivan Walden, Dr. Dream, and she is on all social media. Her website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com, but she's also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You're everywhere, Kelly.
I try, George. I'm trying to keep up with you.
Good for you. Good for you. Why do people have nightmares?
I think nightmares are the unsung hero of our subconscious mind.
The heroes?
Yes, because they're kind of like the police in some way. Like my dad was a cop, so I know that there's some bad cops out there, but Mostly cops are trying to
There are
just
a lot of good ones.
keep the peace, and our nightmares are trying to let us know where to course correct when we've strayed too far to the right or to the left, when we've gone out of balance. And a lot of us do live lives that are not quite in balance. So they're showing us very vividly what to pay attention to, not just to scare us, but for us to make some changes in our waking life. And there's a feedback system. If we do make some changes, even subtle changes in our waking life, our nightmares will lessen and our dreams will reflect that. And sometimes those nightmares will transform into something quite lovely and positive as a sort of reward mechanism. So they're important to pay attention to. They're not just out to frighten us.
Interesting. Now, can you go to sleep thinking, I'm going to have a nightmare?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know that anybody really wants to do that ever, except Mary Shelley back in the day.
Yeah, Frankenstein.
Yes, you know about that story. Yeah, they were trying to come up with, they went to sleep having this salon where they were talking about who could come up with the most incredible idea for a horror story. And so they deliberately wanted to have nightmares, and she dreamt of Frankenstein, and she won the contest. But most people, I would say, don't really want to have a nightmare. Everybody would prefer a sweet dream, and yet it evades us. I mean, most people's remembered dreams are of the nightmare variety, but that's not because those are the only dreams we're having. Those are just the ones that stand out so viscerally and vividly that we tend to think that those are the primary dreams that we're having, but they're really not.
Can you turn a nightmare into something positive?
You absolutely can. Years ago, this is the majority of my practice is built around transforming a nightmare into a rightmare. That's what I like to call it. It's and later I found out that this is what they've been doing at Harvard and Columbia University and so many different sleep laboratories and dream laboratories, where there's this very fancy practice called IRT. They call it imagery rehearsal therapy. It's where you, in your waking state, you discuss a previous nightmare, and then you talk with somebody about how, if you were lucid, you would change that dream. If you had the ability to create any kind of outcome, how would you rewrite that dream? And this is what I'd been doing for years before I found out that Harvard was doing it. I thought they maybe hacked into my dream and borrowed that system from me. But the idea is that a nightmare is an unfinished dream. If we had the ability to go back into that dream with full lucidity, we would change that dream into something that ended, just like a nightmare or just like a horror movie, for example. Often, if we left the movie 5 minutes before it was over, we would be traumatized. But if we stayed to the ending, often the hero is triumphant in the end. So we want to go back in and finish the dream in a way that leaves us feeling empowered.
Do people sometimes have a dream and they just go, gosh, I'm glad that was just a dream?
Oh, yeah, and I've had those myself, but the problem is that it isn't just a dream. It is its own reality on its own parallel plane. So I like to say that we can say it's not just a dream, but it is a reality that we're now not involved in because we're in a waking state. But it's as if there's this it's like a dangling participle. It's like this thing that is happened that's out there that is unresolved. So in some way, a nightmare that's unresolved will continue to kind of wear on us because we're aware that there's something still out there that we haven't solved, we haven't fixed. So it's important to loop back in our waking state, whether in our own journal or talking to a friend or to a therapist or to me. People can always contact me. I get a lot of people that reach out to me and share their nightmares. I do private sessions and workshops with people. But it's important to close that loop and to finish those dreams in a way that gives you power. And I have an example of that from one of my clients, if there's time for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a client of mine who had a recurring dream about being chased by a giant man that she believed was trying to kill her. And every night he would get closer and closer and closer, and finally one night he caught her, and this is very gory, so if anybody's listening, I want to give a trigger warning, so stop listening if you're scared, or put a bubble around you of safety.
Just keep it clean, Kel.
Keep it clean. In the dream, so he hurts her. Let's just say he kind of dismembers her, and that's how the dream ends. And so obviously horrible. So I told her a nightmare is an unfinished dream. Let's go back into that dream, but not from a scared place. I want you to suit up and resource up before you go back in. What do you need to feel strong in order to go back in? And she said, well, I would call on my angels. I would call on my animal spirit guides. And so she didn't just go back in as a scared victim. She went back in empowered with an army of beings that had her back. And she was able to go back into that dream and imagine that she had the power to pull herself back together, to remember herself, to put her arms and her legs and her torso, everything back together. But just like how it is whenever we put ourselves back together, even in memory, it's never quite the same as it was once upon a time. It's better. It's kind of like if way back in the day, the bionic man and the bionic woman.
Sounds like Humpty Dumpty.
Exactly. But in the bionic situation, we're going to put them back together, but only different, only better, only stronger. So she comes back in her newly imagined version of the dream, a more powerful version of herself, and she turns and faces the man that had hurt her, and he is now humbled. He's now terrified of her. And she, instead of hurting him, she turns her back and she walks toward the light, only to realize that he's now following her. And she realizes that now this guy is sort of in her debt. He is now sort of her servant who's there to help her on her path. So when she comes out of the session with me, she said that not only was she no longer afraid of men, no longer afraid of her relationships, her ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, but she said she felt like she is now powerful to be able to walk in and know that whatever she goes through, she's going to remember her strength and remember how powerful she actually is. So she doesn't have to be such a tough chick, one of those women that's got a chip on their shoulder and has to be mean to men. She's able to be softer and kinder because it's as if she has the power of kind of a triple black belt who doesn't have to go around having to prove how tough she is. So things are moving a lot better for her in the relationship domain as a result of that work and that dream.
Now, regular dreams that people have that are not nightmares,
correct.
How do we explain that?
Well, it's important, I believe, to pay attention to any remembered dream, even if it's just a little fragment, a little wisp, even if it seems completely nonsensical. I think it's important for us to have a great respect for our dreams and our dreaming mind because they are filled with wisdom that is beyond the scope of our ordinary rational consciousness. These dreams, even not the nightmares, the nightmares I'm a big fan of, as you know, George, but the regular dreams are also just dripping in wisdom. Dreams are the language of our soul. So every remembered dream, and every time we work on a dream, give it a little bit of attention, even just a little curiosity. It's as if we're bolstering our own soul. And really, if we think about what is the main problem in this world, we could say it's about soullessness, people acting from soul loss, kind of acting like vampires, trying to take vital energy from other people and other circumstances instead of remembering to get their own power from themselves. So I think our dreams, every dream, is trying to help to return us back to the source of our own strength, of our own spirit, of our own soul.
Kelly, what do you think of karma?
I absolutely believe in it. I do. Why?
What goes around comes around?
Yeah, absolutely. The good and the funky and the not so good, absolutely. That's why our mutual friend Dannion Brinkley talks about this, about the holographic life review on the other side. And having had my own near-death experience, I can attest to this, that anything we do, anything we put out there comes back to us. And I don't know if it's true that it comes back 10 times, but we do experience absolutely everything that goes out. So I think the belief in karma makes us want to be kinder people, because we realize, just like in dreams, everyone and everything is an aspect of ourselves. The way we treat anyone else, we're treating ourselves. So I think that the awareness of karma is a little instigator for us to level up a little bit toward us becoming slightly better people.
By the way, I hear you're giving away a luxury retreat in Costa Rica.
I am. I just did the drawing today, but I am still giving away. So, yes, I have a retreat in Costa Rica. And actually what I'll do is, if anybody who's listening from your show, I will give them an additional $500 off of the retreat that's coming up in Costa Rica. It's in the summer. It's in June. It's a Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste retreat at this luxury retreat center that has its own waterfall on site with a beautiful mud bath. So
you're in the mud.
I am in the mud. You know, you might as well. It's a great exfoliant. So, but it'll be fun. And
did you know that some people who are holistic eat mud?
Yeah.
It's supposed to cleanse your insides or something.
And they probably drink their own urine as well, and I'm sure that's really good for them. But I haven't quite taken that leap. Not quite.
Good.
But you never know. But
anyways, back to this retreat.
Back to the retreat. Yes, I love doing work one-on-one with clients, and I love the next level up is working in groups. And the absolute best thing I love to do is to take people on a retreat where we get to spend days together. This will be a 5-day retreat where we get to go really deep. So if somebody has an issue, and we all have them, we all have the little issues, we have the medium-sized issues, and then we have the big issues. We have the issues that just break our hearts and that just, it's like those sacred wounds that just don't seem to go away. I want people to bring that to the retreat so that they can have a very deep and profound transformation around that issue that's been with them their whole life. And that's my intent for this retreat. So it's going to be beautiful. There will be yoga, delicious food, and there will be dream work. But there is going to be a big transformation with regards to whatever it is that core wound that we've all been walking around with. It's time to heal that.
How do you re-enter a dream? You know, you're having a great dream and the phone rings and you wake up.
Yes.
How do you go back into that?
It's a great question, George. And so many people want to know how to do this, because when we re-enter a dream, it's really powerful, especially if it's a really good dream or interesting dream. So it's not an exact science, but what I've learned is there's a few things. The first thing is, if we can, the moment we get distracted and we wake up from the dream, as quickly as possible we want to return, because we're kind of in a race against time. The more time that passes, the harder it gets to return back to that dream. But if we can, as quickly as possible, part of the way to re-enter the dream is through our physical position. So we want to, if we were laying in bed on our right side when we were having that dream, we want to try to replicate that position, because there's something in the physicality of the way the pillow is, the blankets, whatever, that will put us back into that zone. So that's the physical part is the easiest part to handle. The next part of it is more of the mental, emotional aspect. So if it's not happening immediately, we can ask ourselves, what is the energy of that dream? Was it positive? Was there love involved? Was it scary? Was it challenging? What was the primary energy? And we can just try to retrieve it, at least in our memory, to the best of our ability. And or usually there's some standout symbol. There's some visual, because our dreams are primarily operate with our visual cortex. So there's usually some color, some image, some symbol. So if we can even just pinpoint one little tiny part of the dream, and just focus on that and breathe into it and relax into it, not stress about it. If it's meant to be, we will re-enter it to some degree. And if none of that works, we can always, in our waking state, record the dream to the best of our ability, and through our ability to meditate, kind of energetically we can attune right back to that wavelength and in some way pick up where we left off, even in our waking state.
Back in 2013, you wrote a book called It's All in Your Dreams.
You remember that?
Of
wow,
course.
George, thank you. My God, we go back a long ways now.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. That was...
I'm going into my 21st year doing this program.
Wow. Gosh, I remember when you first started. I remember when it was Art Bell and you were coming on and you were... that felt like yesterday. I can't believe it.
Where does the time go?
We're in a time warp. Life is a dream, George. I think when you do what you're good at and what you love, time flies. So, wow.
What's that saying? Row, row, row your boat. Life is but a dream.
Life is but a dream. It's not that life is fun when you're having flies. No, it's time flies when you're having flies.
Exactly. Could our life be a dream?
Could life be a dream?
Yeah.
I believe it is. The shamans believe we are always dreaming, all the time. We are a dreaming species. In fact, we're never not dreaming. It's just there's sort of a different way of dreaming. There's different properties involved. In our nighttime dream, we can shape-shift and we can walk through walls and we can shift from the past to the present in the blink of an eye. It's a little slower and a little denser in our waking dream, but the same principles still apply. The things that scare us, if we ogle those things, if we really look at them, we realize, just like in The Wizard of Oz, it's just a little man behind a curtain. There's nothing inherently terrifying in the things that we think are so big and scary. If we really look at them and we bring in our army of light, we can handle anything.
Kelly, we're going to take a break here and come back and take calls on your book. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Folks, if you've had a crisis, share it with us. And then dream. And, of course, this hour we'll take your calls with Kelly Sullivan Walden. Her new book is called A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. Just came out. We'll take your calls on that and dreams when we roll right back. Welcome back. George Norrie with you. Kelly Sullivan Walden with us. Kelly, do you think it's natural for most people to have gone through some kind of crisis or calamity in their life?
Oh, I don't think any of us get through our lives without something big. In fact, I would say that it's just it's the fine print that we forgot to read before we incarnated. It comes with it.
It's part of the deal, isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of is. And like they say, that pain is necessary, but the suffering is optional. So there was an article about how it takes actually this was in Time magazine, it was between 3 to 5 years to recover from a debilitating loss. But what I've discovered is if you practice, if you work on transforming the tragic into magic, if you do something, then you can reduce that time to months. It doesn't have to be years out of your life that you're spent grieving, and it's so yeah. I mean, my whole message is about we are going to go through difficult things, but we want to mine all the gold from it, so that we can become stronger, better, smarter as a result of our difficulties. And then we want to drop it. We don't want to identify ourselves with that pain. We want to be able to move in and have our identity be associated with the things that we do and that we're proud of and that we're good at in this life, instead of attaching to an identity that's around our suffering and struggling.
Is it conceivable that you can train people to have good dreams?
Yes, and a big part of that is actually the way we live our lives. There are some dream tribes that suggest that, not just suggest, but it's kind of a demand that you live your life in such a way so as to have good dreams, meaning that you don't eat a heavy meal before you go to sleep. If you have an unresolved argument with somebody, you seek to resolve it so that you don't have to burden your dream time with that energy. You don't watch something that's going to be terrifying you before you go to sleep. You want to, even if you watch the news or you're listening to something scary, like sometimes I know on this show there's, you reveal some difficult things, but I would say before you go to sleep, at least have a touchstone of something that gives you some kind of peace. You have a prayer, you have a meditation, you have something that gives you some peace so that you're not burdening your dreams with the scary things that are happening in your life. And life can be scary, but if we do some things, just some very simple things in our waking life, we can bolster ourselves so that we do have better dreams. And our dreams they're kind of a litmus test on how we're living. So if we want to have sweet dreams, then we kind of need to do the best we can to have a sweet life.
All right, let's take some calls, Kelly. Let's start with Julia in Louisville, Kentucky, east of the Rockies. Hi, Julia. Welcome.
Hi. I have a dream. Well, it started out as a nightmare, and it haunted me ever since I was a child.
Oh, my gosh.
I'd be walking along the river. I live right here by the Ohio River. And this serpent would appear out of the river. And then I would take off running, and I'd end up in this field where I was met by these 3 geishas that were being carried in a carriage by 4 turtle footmen.
Whoa.
And they would step out, and one geisha was dressed in pink, one was dressed in purple, and one was dressed in emerald green, and they would start giggling, and they said, "It's here." And I said, I would ask them, I said, "What's here?" And they would point, and here the serpent was racing towards me, and it would scare me. And every time for years, I'd wake up just shaking and sweating. And then it stopped in 2015, and right before the pandemic hit, the nightmare started, but this time I was ready for it. And I remember I was so lucid and so aware I could smell the wet grass, I could smell the earth, I could even smell the sandalwood off the geishas. And when I stood there talking to them and the serpent came and wrapped itself around me, I looked at it. It had its mouth gaping open and slobbering. And I said, "What do you want? What do you want?" And the geishas kept saying, "Don't be afraid. Face your fears." And the serpent looked at me, and I thought it was going to eat me. And he says, "I want you." And then all of a sudden, head first, it went into my navel and just into my body. And I fell to my knees, and I was shaking. And the geishas all gathered around me and says, "What you resist persists.
Wow.
Face your fears." And I woke up, and I thought, what in the world? And I thought, no, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to face whatever fears come to me. Well, this year, I was diagnosed with stage 2 cancer.
Oh, boy.
And colon cancer. And I remember telling my doctor, because I kept feeling like something was crawling around in my abdomen. That's why I went and had it checked. And for whatever reason, I wasn't afraid. I was relieved. And I thought about it, and all of a sudden, I was wide awake in the doctor's office, and I remember seeing the geishas standing there. They were right there in the room with me.
What kind of sign is that, Kelly?
My God, this is such a powerful, powerful dream, Julia. The first thing that I think of, this is not the first time I've heard about somebody having a terrifying dream about a snake and it somehow becoming cancerous later. And also snakes in dreams come from the ancient Greek dreaming temples, the Asclepian temples. It's where we get our symbol for medicine from the snakes that are the caduceus. And so often snakes, in addition to being terrifying, because a lot of us that were raised religiously, we tend to associate the snake with the devil. It can also represent cancer, obviously, but it's also a symbol of transformation because snakes shed skin. But what I'm struck with here is the nature of these geishas, because often in dreams, and this is why I'm so glad Julia didn't waste this nightmare, because there's power in this dream. It shows the problem, which is the snake, the cancer, but they always do this. They always show what the solution is as well. And in this case, these geishas, the first thing I thought of was Kuan Yin, who is the great ancient beautiful healer of compassion. But also there's something in these colors, the pink, the purple, and the emerald. If it were my dream, I would I would surround myself in those colors. I would dress in those colors. I would meditate on those colors. And I imagine there's a very high vibration to these colors, and sometimes the very antidote we need to whatever the challenge is might come in the form of the energy that these colors provide, that this dream brought to you. So I feel like that's what I would focus on here. And I wish you so much luck, Julia, and I hope to hear from you again and hear something wonderful on the other side of you getting through this ordeal.
Good luck, Julia. First-time caller Chris in Texas. Hey, Chris, thank you for calling.
Hi, George. Long-time listener. Been listening since the 90s. Art Bell.
Thank you, sir.
My wife and I lost our 21-year-old son in August in a tragic accident. And my other, I have a 19-year-old son, and the three of us we're just having obviously a real hard time, and wondering if you can give us any advice.
Oh, Chris, my heart is with you. I can just feel the broken heart that you're in the midst of, and I want to just I don't want to pour pink paint over all this. I want to just, if I had all the time in the world, I would want to spend time with you and just be there in the grief with you, because that's real. In the Ogle formula that I talk about, there's time and lots of room for the O and being in the pain of it. But in order to find your way through this, there's a story in my book, actually. It's called Mosaic, and it's about a family who lost their young son. I believe he was in his early 20s as well. And it talks about the way that the family is kind of moved through and the way that I was involved in that. But the basic idea is the blessing, the only blessing that can really come here is to attune yourself to what may be happening on the other side. Because when this kind of a tragedy happens, I would bet every ounce of every bit of wisdom I have, all the money in the world, that he is trying to communicate with you through dreams, through metaphysical encounters, and the healing that can come through these circumstances it's like there's no book in the world that could give you the wisdom that he's trying to send you from the other side. So I'm not trying to in any way diminish the pain that you must be in, but I want to at least open you up to pay attention to those signs and to take them to heart and to deeply breathe them in and to look for them. Are you finding some of those, Chris?
Oh gosh, yeah. We get signs all the time. We took just on a whim. We were on vacation in Mexico, and there was an ayahuasca ceremony, and my wife and I went through that, and it was very helpful for both of us. I think we both like to do that again. We've talked to a couple different mediums, and he's sent us signs through that. And then in our daily life, he sends signs to us all the time. I mean, it's he's with us all the time. We know that. It's, the hardest thing is my wife, especially. She just wants him to come back in his physical state, and obviously that's not going to happen. But
right. So the idea,
that.
it's not going to happen. But there is something that it's possible if you were to take any one of those messages that he's sending you, and he's sending you a ton. If you could even just take one of them all the way in, then and start to truly develop a relationship with the new version of him, and have that become even more real than what it was like before. There's no denying the physical presence, and we're always going to miss that. But there is never an absence of that love and of that relationship. And really, it's up to us to be able to attune ourselves to that more subtle frequency. But when we do, there's that aching can start to diminish. My heart's with you, Chris.
Thank you,
so
Chris.
much for asking.
Thomas in La Jolla, California. Hello, Tom.
Hi, George. Thank you for accepting my call. Kelly.
Hi, Tom.
You always bring great information to the table. I look forward to obtaining your new book.
Well, thank
you. And a comment and then a question.
Great.
And it seems to me that writers and musicians leverage dreams. And I can give a number of examples from George Orwell, said that he wrote the book 1984 out of dreams. And if you reread 1984, the main character learns about the truth about his totalitarian world through his dreams. And writers like Philip K. Dick, Rod Serling also relied on dreams. Richard Matheson, who wrote the movie Somewhere in Time, was also based upon a dream. Michael Crichton also has stated, before he passed away, that he based most of his novels, like Jurassic Park, etc., upon his dreams. And it seems to me, I'm reminded of A.E. Van Vogt, who he wrote the most fantastical science fiction stories, and it became the basis. Hollywood took his story and made the movie Forbidden Planet. And Ridley Scott, also based on A.E. Van Vogt's stories, developed the movie Alien.
Wow.
And A.E. Van Vogt said, he goes, how I develop my stories is for 30 years, I set a timer, and every 45 minutes, I wake myself up and write down my dreams. And then I cut and paste the dreams together into these fantastical stories. So that brings me to my question, Kelly.
Yes.
It seems that if you're a writer or a musician, a dream is a terrible thing to waste. I wonder if you could expand on that.
Absolutely. And we're all creative people, whether it's what we make our living doing or not. But our dreams are the stuff of magic. It's the most democratic thing in the world. A child, an elder, a man, a woman, whatever religion we're from, whatever we've been through, we all have access to that incredible realm of dreams. And any of us can pull in a dream and turn it into something creative. Stephanie Meyer, she's a contemporary version of that, a stay-at-home mom that wasn't a writer at all. She had the dream about the benevolent vampire and ended up writing the movie Twilight, the book Twilight that turned into a series, and then a series of films, incredibly successful because of this rare idea about a compassionate vampire. What? And so we all have access to this. And I've met so many people, ordinary people that would never have had their star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but they had a really important dream, and it did propel them. There was a man who was a client of mine who was into real estate at one point, and it was during a time when the market was tanking, and he had a dream because he was in some desperate financial straits, and he was asking God for some kind of a dream to help him out, and he got a very strange dream about tree-covered cell phone towers, and he drew a picture of it, he patented it, and he's making millions of dollars from this patent of these fake tree designs that cover up cell phone towers in urban areas. So it's like it doesn't have to necessarily be something creative that turns into poetry or a song or a movie, but it can be something that is life-enhancing, that could actually be pocketbook-enhancing. We all have access to this, even if it simply heals our hearts from a traumatic loss that we've gone through. You're right, Thomas. A dream is a terrible thing to waste. We should all not take them lying down, as I like to say.
Is it acceptable to have grief in one's life?
Oh, my God. Absolutely. I think it means that we're not a sociopath, and that's the good news. It means that we've loved. The grief is the price that we pay for opening our hearts, and I would say that it would be a bigger price to pay to go through this life and not love and to not have our hearts be broken, but to know that we're better on the other side of it. I remember this might sound like a sort of silly example, but it was pretty heartbreaking for me. It was the end of a relationship years ago for me, and I remember as I was crying and crying, this voice came over me, and it said, the relationship's over, and he's going to go his own way. But the love that you experienced, Kelly, you get to keep that love. Your heart opening, that's your gift that you get to keep, and no one can take that from you. And so to me that was empowering because it made me feel like I wasn't stupid or foolish for having love.
Exactly. Kelly, we're going to come back and take final calls with you in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. On our next Coast to Coast program, Dr. Stephen Greer joins us to talk about UFOs, so get ready for that. And then Patty Negri joins us to talk about witchcraft and the paranormal on Coast to Coast. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Kelly Sullivan Walden, our final segment. And again, her website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Her brand new book is called A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste, The Art of Transforming the Tragic into Magic. I like that. Did you come up with that, Kelly?
I did.
Good job.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
We've got final calls here for you. They're lining up. But before we go to calls, let me ask you one more thing about nightmares.
Yes.
Have you ever had a nightmare where you woke up emotional or crying?
Oh, God, yeah.
What causes that?
Oh, because the nightmare is an occurrence. It's actually...
It's like real, isn't it?
Yeah, and it can be. It's wonderful when it can be that cathartic. It can give us an opportunity to do what our ego might prevent us from doing in our waking life. We might not have time to cry, or we don't want to feel those deep feelings. But it's kind of a gift to get to feel all of that, because we came here to feel, and we can't heal what we don't feel. So our nightmares are helping us to stir that pot so that we can move that energy out of our bodies so that we can transform.
Back to the calls we go. Let's go to Kathy in Anaheim, California, west of the Rockies. Hello, Kath. Go ahead.
Hello, George. Congratulations on 20 years.
Well, thank you, Kathy.
Hi, Kelly. It was wonderful meeting you the other day.
Oh, okay. At the book signing?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Hi, Kathy. What's on your heart?
I think it was last week or shortly after the first year. I had 2 dreams, each succeeding night. I almost never have the same theme or see the same person in a dream that close together, but it was my mother. And it's always shortly after the first year that's the anniversary of her passing. But I was curious. In one dream, it seemed like I was performing some task for her, but I can't remember exactly what. And then the next night, I dreamt of her again, not with quite that same feeling, but that she was in the dream. And I was going, I wasn't sure what it was there for, kind of thing.
Well, one of the blessings of dreams that of our departed loved ones is, and it's believed, and I tend to be a believer of this, that more often than not it's a visitation and not just a dream. There's often a significant reason that they do come in, even if the writing isn't on the wall. So we do the best we can, like we're detectives, and we do look at the clues that we are given. And, of course, we can look at it symbolically. There's the mother aspect of self that's coming in and wanting you to help her, help tend to her, help take care of her. So that part's always worth looking at. But otherwise, I would say you said she passed around the first of the year. It could be that there's some part of her. I believe at this time of year, it's not just around Halloween and Dia de los Muertos that the veil between worlds is thin. Not only is this the anniversary of her passing, but it's also a time when there is a very thin veil between the worlds. So I think this is a time, especially around the holidays, that our loved ones come through more often than during the rest of the year, to give us a message or to at least connect with us and even just to hang out with us. And at the very least, what we should know is that it takes a lot of love for them to permeate through and to find us and to connect with us. So even though it might seem subtle, it might seem silly, it might seem like wasn't a big event in the dream, just know that it took a lot of love for her to get through, and at the very least, for you to know that your mom still loves you and she's still with you, and there's hopefully some healing that's happening in your heart as a result of that.
Well said, Kelly. Why does it seem that around the holidays people die?
Why they die? Oh, my heavens. That's a very good question. I don't know exactly. I mean, it's winter time. I was talking to a friend who lost her mother on Christmas Day.
Oh, geez.
And she was saying, she was asking her through a psychic, why did you pick Christmas? And she said, you're trying to ruin Christmas for me. And the psychic said, no, I want you to remember me at Christmas. I want you to celebrate me at Christmas. I loved Christmas. I loved that our family was together at that time. I still want to be with you on Christmas, so think of me during that time. So I like that perspective. They want to be thought of during. It tends to be most people, at least some part of them, really loves the holidays or the getting together of family. So I think that's a positive way of looking at that.
Next up, let's go to John, truck driving in Ohio. Hey, John, thanks for calling.
Hi, George. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, John.
Before I tell you these random dreams, I just want to let you know I have sleep apnea, and have the machine, and that kind of puts me into a deep sleep.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if these dreams are like, I don't see any correlation or anything, but they're just like random. Like I'll have one where it looks like I don't recognize the uniform, but I'm a relief pitcher in the World Series in the late innings. Then I had another one where I'm underground and I have a concrete slab on me and I can't move, and I wake up because all these rats are running over me.
Ooh.
And I can't move, and I wake up kicking the blankets. And then the weirdest one I had, I don't know if you want to call it a nightmare, but I'm on a hill and I can see hurricanes and earthquakes and everything, and I go, man, where am I? And this voice says, you're on Earth. And I'm like, this can't be Earth. What happened? I said, is this global warming? And it says, no. They didn't realize it, but the North and South poles shifted. And for some reason, I have a compass in my hand, and when I look, it's like a clock where the North is like noon, and it's like 5 of, where it's just a little bit off.
Oh.
And then I said, how do we fix this? He doesn't answer me. And then I say, why am I here? Am I just dreaming this, or why am I here? He doesn't answer me, and then I just sit there on this hill, like total disparity, and I wake up. And I'm like, I don't know if it's the machine that's doing this, or these dreams have a correlation, because I can't make hide nor hair of it.
Well, one thing is the fact that you're dreaming and that you're remembering these dreams is wonderful, even if they're disturbing and they don't completely make sense to you. It's a bigger issue if you're not dreaming and not sleeping, and it's not just the machine, because there's millions of people that use those CPAP machines. I think is what they're called, and and everybody has a different kind of dream. It just means that the dreams are going to be intense because you're probably having more REM cycles, because you're actually oxygenating your brain and you're actually sleeping. So these dreams are, we can, I don't know how much time we have, but I'll do my best to just kind of zip through those. First of all, whenever people dream about being out on the mound or pitching, that kind of a thing, my first thought, and of course I would want to interview you and find out your association here, but it's usually about, like, put me in, coach. I want to play. I'm the pitch hitter. I want to play. So it makes me wonder, what is it that you want to really go for? You don't want to sit on the bench. You want to get in there. And so it's preparing you to get out on the field of play and not just contemplate your dreams, that kind of thing. Regarding the underground dream and even the poles shifting, one perspective is to look at every dream and every aspect of the dream as if it's an aspect of self. So there's the upper ground part of us. So there's up on the mound, and then there's up on the hill, and yet there's this underground part. So we are the above and we are the below. We've got all aspects, and it's important for us to have some relationship with all of those parts. And, of course, there's the parts that we love the most. Most of us prefer the up on the mound or up on the hill. What we don't love so much is being underground, under a slab of cement. Nobody likes that, and yet that's a part of our nature where there's a part of us that is connected to the ground, and nobody likes the rats. I mean, there's probably very few people that are like, ooh, yay, I love the rats. But usually that's a part of self that we say, ooh, this is clearly a shadow aspect that is underground, and it's not our favorite part. So, but yet, it's every part of ourself is worth loving. We need rats in this world as much as we don't want to even think about them. But it's all the things that we kind of bury. So I would say you can't, like I said before, you can't heal what you can't feel, and we also can't heal what isn't revealed. So it might be that there's some healing to do in the underground. There needs to be some light shined in some of the places that might have seemed dark and unappealing. And then ultimately about the poles shifting. To me, this dream feels like it's about trying to help me, if it's my dream, find balance within myself. Where am I off kilter? Where have I gotten twisted around or turned around? Or, on the positive side of things, it's wonderful to kind of stir things up a little bit. It helps us to realize that we really are on a planet that is hurling through space at hundreds of thousands of miles an hour. It's amazing that we have any sense of equilibrium ever at all. So in some way, maybe sometimes we have to stir ourselves up and lose our balance to open ourselves up beyond our ordinary comfort zone. So this might be a dream that is one of those breakthrough dreams that precedes a big insight. So I think these dreams are pretty awesome. Thank you, John.
All right, let's take another caller, too. Norman in St. Louis. Take it away. Hi, Norm.
Hey, great show again today.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, I kind of have a strange thing. I met a gal named Kristen at a residential care facility in St. Louis, and I was like in my mid-30s. She was in her late 20s, but I had just gone through a really terrible divorce, and so I was really down, and that's why I ended up there. And she was a rape victim and things, abuse and all that coming up. And what was really weird is over the course of time, she opened up to me, and we opened up, and she mentioned how she had 3 or 4 dreams as a child, and that I was in them dreams. And when she described them, like me being at a park and whatnot, fishing, I remember the exact time I was there. I remember the clothes she described, wearing a certain fishing hat and with hooks on it and stuff. And it was really weird, and we became really like soul connected that way. And this, I'm trying to make this sharp, but I know it's getting late. But one of the weird things is she, because of her stuff, she had to get shock treatments, to forget, these issues of hers. And she would call me up where she wouldn't even know her name for 3 days. It would take 2 or 3 days to get back to normal. But she wouldn't even know her name or how to tie her shoes. And I'd always ask her, Kristen, how in the heck did you call me? How did you remember my phone number and you don't even know your name? And she goes, I don't know. I always know your phone number.
Oh, Norm. Well, this is such a powerful story. I mean, from the perspective of a crisis being a terrible thing to waste, the fact that you both went through so much hardships, that something about the hardship kind of broke down your ego, so that when you two came together, the soul connection that you had was palpable, so you didn't miss each other. And sometimes it's mutually shared crises that bring people into such depth of intimacy. And it seems like you two are the quintessential poster children for what are soulmates, star-crossed lovers. I mean, clearly you dreamt about each other before you even met. This is absolutely gorgeous, and in the midst of such pain. I mean, it's like, talk about the beauty amid the pain. Like, you wouldn't want to throw this whole story out just because there's pain. You want to mine for the gold here. And the fact that she remembers your phone number, even when she doesn't remember her own name, You two clearly have a bond that is solid gold, and nothing that she's been through and that you've been through can take away that gold that you two have together and for each other. And what a source of strength. This is really inspiring. What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it, Norm.
Kelly, you need to come on more than once a year, huh?
Hey, just give me a call, George. You call me and I will come running.
All right, you take care of yourself. Keep in touch, and good luck with the new book, A Crisis is a Terrible Thing. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.